All right, so we are here today with Rebecca Enonchong, who I've been a super huge fan on Twitter. You're certainly famous on Africa Twitter. I wish I could speak French so that I can follow, what's going on in Cameroon Twitter a little bit better. But it's, Swahili for me is first on the chopping block to learn. So French, I guess, will come second from that. But thank you so much for joining.
You could always use the translate button.
Well, that's true, but
on the tweet.
It's not that great. It's certainly gotten better since I think Microsoft is doing something with Twitter on that, but it's still kind of fuzzy for me to try to understand.
Yeah, and I usually tweet in French for things that are more very for Cameroonians.
Okay.
Versus
exactly.
Towards a global audience.
In order to be an insider, I have to speak French, or otherwise, I'm just getting the high level Anglophone English stuff. It's not as great, but I'm very grateful that you took the time to stop by.
No, I'm happy to be here. Very honored.
And so I had no idea that you were good friends with my partner Ndile Masuku. So
absolutely.
Yeah, it was a picture from Afrobytes.
Yes.
Actually, I saw you guys were on the same panel, and just like the body language, I could tell, okay, I think they're friends. I think they have a good relationship.
Yeah, we go way back.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I guess when did you guys first connect?
On Twitter.
On Twitter. Oh, well, there you go. There you go.
But then I think it's been about 4 or 5 years ago, I was on his podcast.
Yes.
In South Africa. I was in Cape Town for something, and they came to my hotel and interviewed me.
Amazing.
And that
was
really fun.
African Tech Conversations?
Yes.
Was the first one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, it was a great episode. Definitely dove into a lot of the more personal stuff because,
Yeah, I actually did two, come to think of it, because I did one that was in South Africa, and I did one in another country that we were both in at the same time. Don't ask me which one. I can't remember.
Okay.
But
yeah. Okay. So when you're actually on the continent, I know you're kind of back and forth between Cameroon and DC, but outside of Cameroon, where do you find yourself spending the most time on the continent?
Oh my goodness, everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah, I'm really this year I've been to Senegal, I've been to Mali, I've been to Nairobi, I've been to South Africa, I've been to, a lot of places.
Yeah. Well, do you find yourself, do you find yourself spending more time in Francophone Africa than you do in Anglophone?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
No, not really.
Because I know I did see you put out an article, I believe it was a couple of years ago now, I guess talking about the differences in doing business, right? In Francophone Africa versus Anglophone. It seems like you're very passionate about that.
Yeah, well, see, because I come from a country that's bilingual.
Yes. And
so I see this difference in business culture. Within the same country,
right?
Within with the entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurs from the English speaking side and the English entrepreneurs from the French speaking side are different, even in this very same country, right? And so I've done some sessions, for instance, in Côte d'Ivoire for more francophone startups, where there was mentorship and things like that, where I really saw so different, francophones tend to be very structured, right? I've got everything is in order, right? Back office is set, but they don't have a product. Right. Whereas the Anglophones are they'll get the product and then try to start selling it. And then, oh my goodness, they're asking me for such and such a document for my company. I need to register it, so it's a very different approach. I think that we're more accustomed to the Anglophone way of doing it, but it doesn't mean that the Francophone is all bad. It's just slower, I think, to get started. But then because you have your back office in order, when you launch your company and you actually do launch your product, you may last longer. It's just that you may never get your product out.
Right.
So it's just a different approach.
Well, do you find that it's pretty binary in terms of teams are either completely Anglophone culture, completely English speaking teams, and vice versa with the French, or do you find that there's typically like a mix, or sometimes a mix between the two?
I think in Cameroon, we're seeing more and more of the mixes,
Right.
because I mean, we are hoping, I mean, this is one ecosystem that we're talking about. Even though we talked about the Silicon Mountain community, Silicon Mountain, which is on the English speaking side, which started on the English speaking side, has really grown into an ecosystem that goes beyond the borders of the English speaking side. And so I think in Cameroon, it's very unique in that it's one community, right? I would say all the way from like the English speaking side all the way to Douala is one community, and then maybe you have the Yaoundé startups that are more francophone.
Interesting. Well, so can you kind of break? So and that was the first time I've heard Silicon Mountains, by the way. I've never heard
really?
that. Did you coin that?
I did.
Yes.
Well, I think I used it. I think maybe other people might have used it, but I think I was the first official person to use it in a speech. And so, yeah, it's really a community. You know, the epicenter of the tech ecosystem in Cameroon has always been in Boya on the English speaking side. So it was just a way to give a name to that movement that developed, that was a grassroots movement and a community, a real sense of community, of doing things and collaborating and building together. And I think that, you know, those of us that live in Douala are very happy to have been adopted into that community, and that community to have extended its reach beyond the mountain of Boya.
And is there a particular reason that has become kind of the central point? Like, is there like a success story, or like one kind of exit that happened there?
I think it's just that they came together earlier than anybody. You know, they started having meetups, and they got together as a community. And I think that's what makes it so unique, right? And so you have a number of startups that started there. You know, ActivSpaces, which is the main tech hub, started in Boya.
Oh, really? I didn't
know
that.
Yeah, before Douala, way before.
Yeah.
Yeah, years before.
I first heard about them, so I'm good friends with Verla Llewellyn.
Yes.
Too. I'm sure you guys are best buds as well. And she was the one that kind of told me about ActivSpaces, and I think I did a podcast episode with them way back in the early days of this. Before we had this beautiful new studio.
Yeah. So ActivSpaces started in Boya.
Okay.
So the African Center for Technology, Innovation, and Adventures.
Oh.
So I don't know if you knew.
I did not know that. I did not know that.
Yeah, and then Spaces.
Yeah.
So yeah. So you know, because of the political situation, and obviously it started with the internet issue, and where the internet was completely cut off, not just social media, for 93 days in 2017. So that that really hurt that community a lot, because they couldn't communicate with anybody, they couldn't carry out their businesses, they couldn't, and so it really was a very painful experience. And we started seeing changes in the community, and Silicon Mountain not being as strong and powerful as it once was. And then now, because of the violence and, you know, the insecurity in the area, it's you know, so a lot of people have taken refuge either on the French speaking side or in Nigeria.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, the ability for a government to shut off the internet is certainly a big concern in Africa. I know it happened in Ethiopia, I believe, as well. But they were just doing it for like exam cheating? Or?
Well, that's what they said.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, that's what they said. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think Cameroon isn't the only one to have cut off. I think Cameroon is exceptional in that it was a full shutdown.
Right.
They didn't just shut down social media. They didn't just shut down mobile internet. They shut down the entire internet for millions and millions of people. And you know, you couldn't do banking, you couldn't do anything. And so it was unique in its severity and its breadth.
Right.
And the length of time, because 93 days, that's over 3 months.
Yeah, it's a very long time.
That's a really, really long time, and enough time to have very long-term consequences, not just for the English-speaking side, but for the entire the entire country.
Right.
But it's not alone. I mean, we see it every time there's an election or something political happening in an African country, they'll shut down the internet. We've seen it in Benin, we saw it in Togo, we saw it, as you said, in Ethiopia, in Zimbabwe. It just seems like it's a tool. It's in the toolkit of dictatorships,
right.
As one means of, of fighting dissent. And Sudan, of course. And it doesn't work, right? Like it's been proven over and over and over again that internet shutdowns do not create any peace. Absolutely at all.
Yeah.
I mean, in Cameroon, if we think about it, like in 2016, when the demonstration started and the civil disobedience started, there was no violence, right? And they shut down the internet to say that they wanted to prevent violence. But it created the opposite effect. We've had thousands of people die after the internet was shut down, because it really created a sense of, it solidified those who were thinking that they were ostracized by the Cameroon government, that they didn't matter to the Cameroon government, and the extremist voices started to take over, and violence ensued.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, like the intention is irrelevant. It's more important that the precedent that it sets is much more. It's the whole point of the show that we're doing is to kind of paint Africa in a positive light, because here in the West we have this one-sided narrative of war, poverty, and disease, and it's not the whole story.
Oh yeah, and I think it shows also the resilience of Africans that are still able to innovate and are still able to create viable businesses and technologies in such a difficult environment. And we saw one of the winners of the Google Code competition. It's a worldwide coding competition. And the winner of that competition, the first time there was an African winner, was during our internet shutdown in Cameroon.
Really?
And he was from the English-speaking side.
Huh.
So he had to travel to the French-speaking side to finish, because he had started before they shut down, and then it takes several weeks of the competition does, and then finished it while he was on the French-speaking side, and he still managed to win.
Yeah.
There's so many examples of how resilient our people are, and how despite all the adversity, there's always the ability to come up with something amazing.
Yeah, I always tell people the entrepreneurs that are operating in Africa, I mean, they're by far the toughest in the world.
Oh, yeah.
There's no question. There's no comparison in the US.
Yeah. Take them to Silicon Valley and they will make a killing.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it makes me sad to see these, maybe that's not the right word, just to see Bird and Lime and a company that's able to raise, I think they went from nothing to $1 billion valuation in 6 months. Unbelievable. And if just a little bit more of that capital was able to flow to emerging and frontier markets, I mean, it could have such a big impact in the world. Granted, I absolutely love these scooters. They've changed my life in DC. Absolutely changed my life, because I could just leave my car in a parking garage for $15 for the day and take a scooter anywhere in DC, and it's amazing.
Yeah, but I think that because we've been talking about that, because there was the report of there are 47 startups in Africa that have raised over $1 million so far in 2019. It was put out by GSMA. So, I mean, it was they were just published this week or something. And so it's very interesting to see where those startups are and who the founders are. Right. So of course, there are very few women that were co-founders of any of the startups that raised money, but even so, most of the startups, most of the money that's been raised has been raised by foreign founders. And I think that there's this difficulty we have, I think the pattern recognition issue, that even Blacks in Silicon Valley are having difficulties with, is that we don't look like what a successful entrepreneur looks like. Even though Elon Musk is an African guy, he's a South African guy.
True.
He doesn't look like an African guy, right? So he can pass for what success looks like.
Right.
So he doesn't have to prove it over and over and over again. And I think that, we need more examples of success that doesn't look like typical Silicon Valley.
Right.
And we need to promote those images so that not just venture capitalists and investors see that there are other successful models, but also entrepreneurs can see that, hey, she was able to raise,
right.
$1 billion. I can't be, I can do it too. Right.
Yeah. So, I think expats coming in and raising capital isn't necessarily a bad thing unless there's a shift towards more of that capital going to local founders. So like in Brazil, back in 2008, when Brazil was kind of like the hot market, a lot of MBAs from the US would travel there and raise venture capital to start a company, and they would hire a lot of local Brazilians. And after the kind of Brazil bubble burst, a lot of those MBAs left, and then the local founders had a couple years of experience in the industry under their belt to actually, step in, and a lot more capital started flooding into the local Brazilian entrepreneurs. But I don't think that's happening right now in Africa to anywhere close to the extent that it happened in Brazil.
Yeah, we're not seeing it yet. And I think maybe also because there are very few companies that are raising substantial amounts of money. Right. You can count them on one hand. Right. So even if you've worked for one of those companies, it doesn't give us enough in terms of numbers.
Right.
Right. We would need thousands and thousands of executives working, that come out of these companies so that we can have enough critical mass, right, to make that a viable model. But what frustrates me a lot is that we have some startups that are locally founded by founders that may have even studied overseas, or their business model is identical. They go to the same venture capitalist investors to raise money. They're not able to raise money, and then a foreign founder will come, doesn't know the market nearly as well, and will be able to raise the money.
Right.
And then use that money to basically destroy the competition, which is the local entrepreneurs, right? Mm. So that's frustrating, and that's something that we need to identify as a problem and come together, to find solutions. To that.
Well, I guess my question to you, I know you're a huge advocate for the ecosystem. You started African Business Angel Network and Cameroon Angel Network and ActivSpaces. The list goes on and on of the kind of ecosystem evangelizing that you've done. So I guess my question to you is, I think there's two pieces to it. I think the first piece is, how can we activate more corporate venture capital, and how can we activate more diaspora angel investors? And I think if we can do that, I think that certainly is a start, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
To build momentum.
Absolutely. Like for Cameroon Angels Network, what we've done is that we have connected with our diaspora, right? So we have some diaspora, members of the Cameroon diaspora that are in Silicon Valley and that want to invest, but they just don't know who to invest in. They don't have the time to fly it back and forth and look at the opportunities. And so, we kind of created that bridge to allow them to invest locally. And we're seeing more and more of that. And we're seeing more and more angel networks, right? The more we structure our ecosystem the better off we'll be, right? So the more angel networks we have versus just having individual angel investors, some of whom don't even know they're angel investors, right? Because it's like somebody's like, I have a little money, I'm going to put money in this startup, you know, or in this company, this young guy came and he has this like really interesting project. And so if we're able to structure our ecosystem better, we will make it stronger.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I have this thesis that the African countries that will have some of the most resilient startup ecosystems over this next, we'll say 5 years, are going to be the ones with a stronger sense of nationalism, where some of the high net worth individuals locally and in that diaspora are willing to kind of place these bets, you know, super high risk versus just getting the 3x on a shipping container, right? Which is, you know, much more reliable, you know, return on your
and
investment.
I think also we need to, you know, we need both, right? We need the high net worth individuals to want to do more than charity. Because what we're seeing a lot of foundations, you know, like entrepreneurship programs, but they're all charitable based and they're not venture based, which to me is an indication that they don't believe in the entrepreneurs yet. Right?
That's a very cool point. Even Zuckerberg's investment in Della
is through his foundation. Yeah. Huh. Wow. Yeah, it's through the initiative, which is a nonprofit.
Right.
So, you know, the more we see real venture capital and real investors that are looking for a return on their investment, even though they may be very, very patient, and more so than if they were in Silicon Valley, it's still really important to look at these businesses as businesses.
Right.
And the entrepreneurs need to look at that as well. I mean, we get I think there's still a lot of a misunderstanding on the investment and why would I invest? I mean, come on, you know, I tell these entrepreneurs that this is money that we earn through like blood, sweat, and tears. Right. And you're just asking me, you have an idea and you just want me to come give you, you know, $50,000 to support this idea.
Right.
And I'm like, there's no way. There's just no way.
Yeah.
I want to see your blood, sweat, and tears.
Right.
Before I'll give you anything. And, you know, we've had this debate where we've been having this debate on Twitter for the last 2 days on, you know, well, why aren't francophones on that list, on that GSMA list of the 47 startups that raised over $1 million this year? There are no francophone, sub-Saharan Africa francophone, right? There's like Tunisia.
Yeah.
But there. So why? And you know, everybody's like, so why is it different? And you know, and it's like, yeah, but we can't raise money, and like, you know, I need the investors to buy into my vision. I'm like, dude, you know, the vision thing. Everybody has a great vision. We don't invest in vision.
Right.
You know, we don't invest in ideas. You know, at least show that you're able to build a product and build a prototype. We're not asking you to have built out a whole company. Right? You don't have to have like an HR department and, you know, your finance department and your, you know, customer service department. You don't have to have all that built out. We're not asking for that, but have the product, at least a prototype ready that you can tell us that you've had tested here and there that works, right? It may not work super well, but please don't come to us with an idea because we can't help you.
Yeah.
You know, because, and I think that everybody thinks that they're on the next great thing, right? But just so you know, like, I probably get 20 requests a day, right?
What, just in your Twitter DMs?
I closed my DMs.
Oh, yeah?
Last week. I couldn't take it anymore. But I still get them in open. And I get them on Instagram and I get them by email and I get them by. So imagine, put yourself in my shoes, right? And I'm not a big investor, right? I can just imagine somebody that is a big investor, how many requests they get every single day,
right?
That they have to sift through And then you're there and you have an idea. And then in the emails that come through, you have people that are looking for money that have traction. They have customers, they have revenue, and they put a short, like the email is like really short and concise and has their, their numbers in it. And I'm like, this is fantastic. And then you are sending me a Twitter DM. I got one today, earlier, just like a little bit ago, saying, I need help. Can you help invest in me, in my project?
Yeah.
Right. Come on, guys. So I think the investors need to trust, African investors particularly, need to trust the entrepreneurs more, and the entrepreneurs need to get further along before they start looking for outside investment.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think another problem, especially another problem with francophone, is that there aren't as many French-speaking venture capital funds as there are, English-speaking from London and the U.S. And so I think that raising capital when you speak only French, I mean, certainly an uphill battle if you're sitting in francophone Africa.
Yeah, I was involved in the Afrique Excel program. So the World Bank had put together a program to support scale-ups, what they had identified as scale-ups, as companies that had already raised a little bit of capital and were looking for additional capital. And so they put together this acceleration program called
Is that what
Excel Africa.
Tony Elias was running?
No.
Okay. Never mind.
I don't think so. It was run last year. It was like they outsourced it.
Okay.
The running of it.
Got it.
So last year it was Excel Africa and it was Pan-African. And then this year they made one that was specific to Francophone Africa called Afrique Excel.
Okay.
Right. And I think it's so that to kind of break that bridge, right? Like to make Francophone African startups more visible to an international community of investors. But those entrepreneurs still had to pitch in English, right? Because they had to learn to pitch in English. So the initial discussions and the initial interviews, they could do in French or English, whatever they felt more comfortable with. But in the end, only because we know that to put these startups in front of the most investors possible,
right.
They really do. English is key.
Yes, no, I agree. But let's talk about you. Let's talk about AppsTech. So, I mean, AppsTech it's amazing business, especially considering the fact that I don't believe you raised capital for it.
No, I couldn't.
Yeah.
This is 20 years ago. So we're celebrating our 20th year.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Started in 1999 in Bethesda, Maryland, so not far from here.
Yes.
And yes, started out great, American dream story, and I keep saying that, like, when I started my company, I didn't really realize that the whole minority, Black woman, African thing was a thing. Right? I always thought, and I always said, and I still say, that technology is a great equalizer, right? When you download an app from your phone, you don't check to see if it's built by a man or a woman, or if it's built by an African or an American. You just want to know that it works, right?
Right.
And so that was my thing, is like, I was able to hide behind this corporate brand that I built, with websites and, fancy websites and fancy cards. And, but it was just me. Right. And I was able to sell. So I didn't have my name on the business card. I mean, I had my name. I didn't have my title on the business card.
Right.
So that I could walk in and be a salesperson, or I could be an engineer.
I see.
I could be whatever.
I don't think you could do that anymore, because they would just look you up on LinkedIn.
They would Google.
Or,
yeah, right. But it allowed me to carry many, many hats and be able to hide behind this company.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just worked there, and I got a lot done, and I was able to sign multi-million-dollar contracts because I just worked there,
Right.
right? And then hire lots of people really fast, and
it's
then
amazing.
So and then hire people, and then get offices, so because they needed to be somewhere, but really just started with the branding and the selling and getting customers. And but then when you go to raise capital, all of a sudden they want to know who owns the company, right? They're like, who is the founder? And you can't say we, right? You can't hide behind the corporate shield. And that's where the difficulty comes in, right? Because nobody, like, they would look next to me. They would look for the real person. And I just give up. I just really gave up. And we had really great traction, really great numbers. I mean, we were growing, by $10 million every year.
Wow.
And, we were profitable. We had an innovative business model. We started doing mobile applications before smartphones. So yes.
What were they built for?
So they would be like, you would get the HTML. So you would get an email, and you would click on the link, and it would take you to an application, for instance, to approve a purchase order.
Okay.
Right. Or approve an expense report.
Right.
We had also created an application that would call you and read your email to you. Right. So if you tagged your email as like urgent or something, it would call you and then say, you have received an urgent email, and and read the email.
And this was like early 2000s.
Yeah. This was 2000,
cutting edge.
2001.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So we had started that. We actually won a prize in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And part of that was being able to get into an incubator.
Were they calling them incubators back then?
Yeah, it was called an incubator. Okay. Yeah, they called it an incubator. It was a government thing. It was a state of Pennsylvania thing. It was in Philadelphia. It was a really weird space.
Okay.
And they gave us $20,000, which was a lot back then, as a prize and to get started. And eventually a lot of the big guys like Oracle and started building the tool into their development products to build mobile apps, which so it kind of made, so we weren't selling the apps, we were selling the platform to be able to develop these applications. And we developed a few applications just to show what the development was. And so perhaps we should have approached it differently. But when because we're AppsTech, people always think that we do apps, like mobile apps, but no, we do, but that's not how we started.
Right. Well, I guess it's different context now. I mean, that's exactly what I thought when I first saw, AppsTech. Yeah. But, I mean, it's a very cool story. And so, but the mobile devices back then, they were just kind of dumb phones, like 2G, Nokia, bricks.
Nokia, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. And then you took your business over to Africa.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's when your battle testing phase started.
Yeah, so it was really interesting because I had some students from Columbia University, MBA students, that followed my journey into opening my Cameroon subsidiary. Okay. And they followed me for several months. So they here in the US and followed me to Cameroon. They traveled to Cameroon and they did their thesis on this, right? So it's still available online. You can download it. It's there.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because when I read it, I sound like, oh my God, I sound so intelligent. And I'm like, I sound like I know what I'm talking about. Right.
Yeah.
And, but I had no clue. Right. I literally had no idea. I think it's an environment that because I'm from the diaspora, and because I traveled to Cameroon very frequently, my family was there. I really thought I understood the country. But it's really when you move back that you really start to understand. And like you spend time on the continent, in country, on the ground for more than a short period,
Right.
because I would go for 6 weeks, right? And so I spent a lot of time on the ground, but I was clueless.
But you grew up in Cameroon, right? You
I grew
came
up in
over
Cameroon.
high school, or?
Yeah, I finished high school in the U.S.
Got it.
And then I went to college, but I grew up in Cameroon, and I went home at the time. So it wasn't as if I didn't study the area. And also because AppsTech we'd opened multiple subsidiaries. So we had our Bethesda, we had an office in Philadelphia. In the US, we had one in Miami, we had one in Canada, we'd opened subsidiaries in France, in the UK. So we knew what we needed to prepare for. And we did the same thing for Cameroon. We did a market study. We had a plan. It wasn't like, oh, it's just my heart.
Right.
So let me just go, even though some of the members of my executive team here in the US, mostly Africans, by the way, had one of them specifically was so against it.
Just expanding to Africa?
Expanding to Cameroon.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, he was like, it does not. He's like, yeah, I see how you've twisted the numbers to make it look like it's a good, yes. But he did not see it. He just didn't see it. And I wish I'd trusted his instincts. But at the same time, I don't regret it. I mean, I almost lost the company as a result, because we really underestimated how different business culture was. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you prepare for that.
Right. Well, right? I mean, I read the story of kind of your run-in with MTN. And that's one thing it's actually a common thing I hear. I was in Lagos, Nigeria in November. I've heard the story then. I heard the story from a company in Nairobi. If the big players in Africa would just pay their bills on time to the startups, I think that we'd see a lot more successful startups.
Yeah, I agree. Like there's two things that happen. One is that they either won't pay you or they'll steal your tech. And I've seen them do both. And it's MTN is known for this, but there are others that do the same thing. It's like they'll do this competition, and then they'll pick out the great ideas out of the competition, and then they'll run with and so it really creates this, there's a sense of distress. And I realized this very, very late. Like I went back to Cameroon. I went to Cameroon for 2 weeks in 2004 to kind of because we had that dispute with MTN, and I was like, I'll just go see the CEO, and we'll sit down and we'll work it out, because that's how business is done. You work it out. Maybe there are disagreements. It's like,
well, because you had a contract with them, right?
Oh yeah. Great contract that had been negotiated over 7 months.
Right.
And so, and you can still make concessions. It wasn't like I was going and saying, this is the contract. You've breached every single article in the contract.
Did they?
Yeah. Except for where there's the name, right? It says the name and address.
Yes. That was truthful.
But everything else, they respected nothing. And so it wasn't like I was just saying, hey, there's a bill, just pay the bill. We'll forget the rest of it. Or we'll just let go of the rest of it. Just pay the bill. And so I went there, and I planned on staying 2 weeks. I stayed 2 years. And
wow.
And and I still didn't get the country. I still didn't understand. It took me until I met with a very high level government official once a few years ago, but way after this happened. And, I was talking about the difficulties in the country, and, talking about that particular case, and, other situations where, people just don't pay their bills. And he's like, why are you so naive? And I was like, what do you mean naive? I mean, I had a contract, black and white. I always do contracts beforehand. And the basic assumption was, why are you expecting people to respect their contract? Nobody respects their contract, right? And I was like, it's so different from what I'd experienced here in the US,
right?
Where when you enter into a business relationship, it's win-win.
Yes.
Right. And what I realized, and looking back, it happened over and over and over again. I just hadn't seen it. Is that the business relationships in Africa, in many cases, there are exceptions, right? But it's one of us is going to get screwed, and it's not going to be me. And so they will anticipate being screwed. And so you put all of these barriers, excuse my language.
No.
You put all these barriers to the relationship to avoid getting screwed, right?
Yeah.
And including like making them pay 100%. If you look at all the business models that are functioning well in Africa right now, look at telco, prepaid. Everything is prepaid because they don't expect you to pay a bill when you receive a bill.
Even rent, you have to pay
a year, 2
ahead.
years in advance.
Yeah.
Everything is prepaid because there's no trust.
Right.
There, and so I think that some of those, and it took me so long to figure out that fundamental difference in you go into a business arrangement assuming that the other person won't respect it. And it's very different from what I think has really helped the US be successful, which is I expect you, I know that you're going to respect. You're honest until you prove me that you're not.
Right.
Which is a very different approach. So everything is done it's structured for honest people.
Right. But that also highlights the importance of having like if you're in the US or in the UK and you want to do business, you want to invest in Africa, it's so important to have that local partner that is on the ground, that you can trust, that can interface with people, that can have, otherwise.
And also understand,
tough.
like, I still don't understand like political talk. Like if I go to Yaoundé, which is our capital, even though Douala is the bigger city, when I go to Yaoundé and I meet with like officials and everything, you always have great meetings, right? But and then when I leave, nothing happens, and they're like, "Well, what did they say?" And I'm like, I need an interpreter because in the room with me that understands their speak,
right? Because
they could be very diplomatic, very polite, very, but they've sent you a message, and you're just like, didn't understand at all what they were trying to say.
Yeah.
So I think that even though I've been there and I understand that I don't understand. Like, at least I know that I don't get it. Right. And yes. It may be beyond me, like beyond. But yeah, it's important to go in with a trusted local partner. I think it makes a difference. I think you also have to be really careful because for whatever reason, I think people believe that are on the continent many times that when you're in the diaspora, that money grows on trees, right? And so we had one experience in Ghana where we opened an office where, we were paying for everything, right? Like, we hired staff and we paid for everything. We paid the rent, and the country manager had been hired from the UK and had wanted to go back to Africa, was not from Ghana, but knew the country well enough that we thought it was a good idea. And then we had all these expenses and no revenue. And then about a year later, I went to a conference somewhere and I met somebody, a Ghanaian. He's like, "Oh my God, AppsTech, your AppsTech system is in Ghana, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh my God, you guys, great. You've done such a great job." And I was like, here we go. Yeah. So we were getting revenue, but it wasn't going into our bank account. So, but I have so many examples like that.
Right.
But I also have a lot of positive examples, of some of the team that started with me 20 years ago is still here.
Yes.
Right. I'm talking about in Cameroon. So some people that started, one guy who started as my driver is now the office manager. He'd never touched the computer before.
Right.
But now he like does his accounting. He does, he scans stuff and sends and does everything electronically. And so it's just, and he's been there 20 years, one young woman who is amazing, who started as like office helper, she'd go get coffee and now she's the, we run a Pearson VUE testing center and she's the administrator. She's certified. She has several Oracle certifications. And she taught herself everything.
Yeah. But I think those stories are why I personally love Africa, because there are so many people that they just need an opportunity. They just need one at bat and they just need someone to give them that shot, and they're going to absolutely crush it, and they're going to, grow in consciousness over time. And I personally feel like there are more people like that on the continent than
and I think they're not the most visible ones.
Correct.
Right. So it's really important to go in and get to know people, especially if you're from that country. Your relatives aren't the first obvious choice, right? Because we think, it's our cousin, it's our, like in any country, you have to be, careful of who you go into business with.
Yes. Well, Rebecca, this has been amazing. Before we sign off, let's talk about ActivSpaces.
Oh,
yes. I want to make sure we get that in there. It's a beautiful new space in Silver Spring.
Yes.
Where did I meet Leslie? I think I met him just at an event in DC, and he mentioned, come check out the space. And so there was another event at ActivSpaces, so I got the chance to get out there, and it's amazing space with an amazing roof with this cool little natural grass setup. It's awesome. But how did that come together?
So Leslie he had a startup. Okay. And I was mentoring him. He's from Cameroon, and I
didn't know that.
Oh yeah. So he had a startup doing it was like a social network for universities. It was a great system. But it didn't work out for many, many reasons. But I kept in touch with him, and he came up with this idea of a co-working space that would be targeted towards the African diaspora primarily, but open, as you saw for that event, open to a full community. And he had found a location. It was a previous location, so we just moved last year. Okay. And he was looking for an investor. And so I was like, and he already had an investor.
What does that mean?
So
family and friends?
No, he had an investor. So he sent me like, all the financial, like he sent me everything, the whole package, the whole pitch deck and everything. And he already had an investor, right? And he was also going to put in some money. And then all he needed would be like, and I was coming in as basically a third investor.
Right. And
I was like, yeah, this sounds like a good idea. I know Leslie. I like the idea. The plans were there. He had, already, like, I was able to visit the actual space. And, he's like, we're ready to start. The landlord, this is the lease, And I put in money, right? And so I ended up being the investor.
Okay.
All of it because the other person didn't come through.
Okay.
Yes. And so that's how I became co-founder.
I see.
Right?
Yeah.
Because,
amazing.
Yeah, I wasn't meant to be this involved.
Got it.
But it's been a great project. So what I did last year in October is when we found this new space that you visited on George Avenue, I mixed in AppsTech, which is now AppsTech Labs, is a new, it's almost a startup for us.
Yeah.
We're building our own platform that we're releasing later this year, hopefully next month. Awesome. And something really spectacular and incredible. I'm so excited, and I hope I get a chance to come back and tell you all about it.
Yes.
But so I decided to consolidate and put both in one location.
Got it.
And sense. So that's yeah.
Well, amazing.
Yeah.
It's definitely
so
a beautiful
it's really
space.
exciting.
Yeah.
It's very exciting. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Rebecca, Enonchong, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Andrew. Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you so much.